Heidi Lawrence, Heidi, has gone through a big career already in the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Moscow Patriarchate in different functions. You can read it in the outline of the conference. So, you want to do a presentation as well? PowerPoint?
No. I will just be reading my thesis,
okay.
yeah.
So, you're very warmly, kindly invited to give your lecture, and we're all very interested. Do you want to use the microphone, or?
Yes, maybe so,
Okay,
yes.
very good.
Yeah,
okay.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Right.
What do you like?
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
you can switch it off if you want.
Dank u wel.
Okay.
No.
Well, it happens to be that sometimes I need to open a conference, sometimes I need to conclude. To conclude is the hardest part because people are tired, and I feel myself obliged to be a bit entertaining. In the case of this conference, I feel myself obliged to be summarizing somehow the presentations that were presented because the previous speakers have covered a lot of what I was going to talk about. And I really appreciate your contributions because I think that so many convergences that we have, so many common points and topics that we've covered indicate that we are on the same page. And it's very easy, very good to be with people on the same page and share the same experience. That's why I'll try to summarize what has been said and maybe to add some more perspective. Actually, it happens that I came here from British Columbia. It took me 2 days to come here, so when you see me falling asleep, don't be upset. It's a jet lag. And I'm essentially on my way. In Canada, I presented on Ukraine. It was a series of lectures. Here I came also to present on Ukraine. Soon I will go to China to present on Ukraine as well. So it seems to be that Ukraine is now a major international topic. It's not really a regional issue, as Mr. Obama says. It's international, and I concur very much with the opinion of my colleague from Yale. He's famous in Europe as well, historian Tim Snyder, who says that Ukraine is now a European issue, and Ukraine is now what Europe should be. And I believe that Ukraine is indeed an international issue, and it is increasingly less about Ukraine itself, as it is about Europe, as it is about Russia. And I firmly also believe that Ukraine is an essential key to the situation in Russia. If we want some changes in Russia, we need to consider Ukraine, which is a key to the changes. And well, the equation is very simple. If Ukraine loses, then Europe loses. If Ukraine wins, Europe wins and Russia wins eventually. And I believe that the situation in the Ukrainian churches is a key to the situation in Ukraine. So it's a kind of double key. The churches in Ukraine is a key to Ukraine per se, and Ukraine is a key to Russia. This is because the Ukrainian people think that the churches are important for them. The Maidan was not just a political or social phenomenon, it was also a religious phenomenon. The people, the protesters who came to the Maidan expressed themselves in religious terms, through the religious symbols, through icons, sayings from the gospel, and the entire social strife was actually also really was expressed in religious terms. Ukraine is indeed a a global issue, as once upon a time the issue of South Africa was. And I'm really grateful for particularly to the earlier presentation by Professor Schreus about the South African case. I think there is a similarity, and Ukraine is a South Africa of today. I find a number of points that make the two cases, the case of Ukraine and the case of South Africa, similar to each other. First, the system of apartheid was a system of division. It was a system to separate essentially the same people. At least now they consider themselves the same people. At the time they didn't, and it was because of the system of apartheid. Of course, in South Africa it was a race issue. In Ukraine it's not a race issue, but it is an artificially created divide between the same people. And in some sense, you can consider the relationship between Russia and Ukraine as a system of apartheid created artificially, created by propaganda. And certainly, if we speak about reconciliation, we need to consider overcoming the divide in the same terms as we and the global international community considered the ways of overcoming apartheid in South Africa. Well, the role of the churches was crucial in both creating apartheid and demolishing it. As it is known, the church, a particular church in South Africa, Nederduitse Gereformeerde Kerk, correct me if I pronounce it correct. I'm sorry. I did it with Dutch, not really Afrikaans accent. It contributed largely to building this this system. Well, we can say that the regime of Yanukovych was supported largely and was built also with the contribution, a significant contribution of the church, from its very beginning, when the patriarch just flew on the day of inauguration of President Yanukovych just to bless him publicly to Kiev, and up until the last day when quite an important figure in the hierarchy of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of the Moscow Patriarchate, Metropolitan Paul Pavel of Chernobyl and Vyshgorod, while leading a blessing service for Yanukovych and his clique at the Kiev-Pечерsk Lavra in the last days of the Maidan, famously assured him, I quote him, "Today you carry a heavy cross, and the church will be with you to the end, just as Simon of Cyrene helped carrying the cross of Christ to Calvary." So he compared Yanukovych with Christ himself, and the church with Simeon of Cyrene, who helped carrying the cross. And this happened, he said this on the same day when the first 3 deaths on the Maidan occurred. So just imagine how cynical this sounded. As the churches, a particular church contributed to the regime of Yanukovych and supported it to its last days, so in the same way, church structures also helped demolishing this regime. And I find a striking similarity between the South African Council of Churches, led by Desmond Tutu, and the All-Ukrainian Council of Churches and Religious Organizations mentioned today. Even though we don't have our own Desmond Tutu, but and this council is more collective organ with no particular leadership. Nevertheless, I think they are quite similar. I find another similarity between the two cases. The idea of reconciliation proposed by Archbishop Desmond Tutu is based on the concept, indigenous concept, important for South African people, the concept of Ubuntu, which is actually difficult to translate. Last November, it was not the one before the last November at the American Academy of Religion. There was Desmond Tutu was presented the John Templeton Prize, and he addressed and he tried to explain what he meant when he said Ubuntu. It was difficult indeed to explain, but at the core of this concept is what we call dignity. It has some similarity with the revolution of dignity. We can say that in Ukraine we had a revolution of Ubuntu. Well, to use this South African concept. So many similar things. And I think the similar way of reconciliation. If we speak about the Ukrainian reconciliation, we can apply the experience of South Africa. I find 3 points that need to be reconciled in Ukraine. First point is the reconciliation between victims and supporters of the regime of Yanukovych. That's actually how the Maidan started. The Maidan started because the number of victims of the regime was so huge that people could not tolerate it anymore. Just imagine some stories. People were thrown to prisons just to blackmail them, to get money from them as ransom for their liberation. The prisons advertised themselves in media. Well, I saw leaflets, from the prisons where they said, we offer such and such conditions. We are better than the other prisons, because people could choose where to go after they were sentenced. They went there, they found money, they paid money, and then they were discharged from prisons. I know a case, a friend of mine, their boy, the family that I knew, their boy studied abroad. He was 17 years old. He came to celebrate his 17th birthday just for one day to Kiev. He was arrested, put to prison, just to blackmail the parents to pay ransom for him. So that was a common thing. Prisons were full, and there were so many victims of that regime that people just could not tolerate them. And well, imagine who brought them, who threw them to prisons, the same Ukrainians, the supporters of the regime. So this is a huge problem. They are still live together. And the problem is how to reconcile them. That is one point of reconciliation. The second point of reconciliation is, which is needed, is the reconciliation between the victims of the war. There are no winners in this war. There are only victims of the war. And they are on both sides of the conflict. And we indeed need ways of reconciliation between now the posterior, what happened, what followed the ousting of the regime of Yanukovych, the war, and the victims of this conflict to be reconciled. And the third, and probably the hardest point of reconciliation, is the reconciliation between the victims of propaganda, because propaganda was and is so hard, it is so brainwashing, it's so effective. It has been recognized in Europe, in the West, that it's really something unprecedented. And how to deal with this, how to deconstruct this propaganda in minds of people who have been affected. This is a huge issue, and this is a question which still requires answer. Obviously, a way to reconciliation, to all 3 reconciliations in Ukraine, is truth. That's why Ukraine needs both reconciliation and truth, or better to say, reconciliation through truth. And the South African experience is really indispensable in this regard. Truth is something that I think can address and can help all 3 points of reconciliation: truth about what was going on under Yanukovych, truth about what is going on at the war, and truth as medicine against propaganda, because we can oppose propaganda not by a counter propaganda, but by saying truth. So things should be named by their names. We should not hide meanings behind words. We should say what the things as they are. And as a way of going from truth to reconciliation, we should also speak about solidarity with the victims. It is important not to say on the one side and on the other side, and the truth is somewhere in the middle. I think this is the technique of the propaganda. The propaganda creates a narrative which is completely false. On the other side, there is an objective, more or less objective, as far as it is possible, representation of the reality. They are both presented by media. And, well, an ordinary person in the West thinks, well, truth should be somewhere in the middle. And this is not the case. Because the propaganda creates purposely a false point to make people believing not in that point, but in something in the middle, which is exactly the purpose of the propaganda, I think. So it is important to have this in mind, this technique of propaganda, and it is also to avoid this kind of intellectual trap. We need to keep in mind victims of the conflict, to be in solidarity with the victims. I just recently came across on the Facebook around the saying of a friend of mine. He's a rather famous Ukrainian Baptist theologian, Mikhailo Cherenkov. He was a president of the Christian University in Donetsk. Well, after the separatists took over Donetsk, they just expelled everyone. They established their own kind of base where they train, themselves and so forth. And Cherenkov is the person from that area, so his witness is very important, and he exactly represents those people, those communities who were suffering most in the east of Ukraine. And some of them were killed, just murdered. Maybe about those cases. I should say that, well, it's interesting that in terms of numbers, if you take the statistics of the Donbas region, the number of the Protestant, mostly Baptist, evangelical, charismatic communities there is larger than the number of the Orthodox communities. It's quite surprisingly. Maybe not in absolute numbers, the people, but the communities, they are tinier, smaller, the communities, the Protestant communities, but they are more numerous. And they actually, I believe they are the most suffering part of the conflict in terms of religion. And Cherenkov says on the Facebook, I just want to quote him, "Instead of premature talks on reconciliation with the aggressor and his supporters, it would be worth first to show solidarity with the victims. Without solidarity with the wounded neighbors, without sympathy and full support to them, dialogues about peace in the world would be a substitution for something very important. We know not only from life, but also from the scriptures, how peace and security can substitute for truth, how political correctness and cautious calculations live without support the victim of aggression. If I bypass the wounded, my appeals for forgiveness and peace are not worth a penny." And now I'd like to come back to the situation in South Africa. The role of the global Christian community was crucial in overthrowing the regime of apartheid in South Africa. Without the churches from outside, without the church-based charitable organizations, I think it would be difficult to speak about overthrowing and healing the wounds of apartheid in South Africa. And this is probably one of the points in which Ukraine is different from South Africa, because, well, we don't see really much support from the churches from outside for the Ukrainian case, and especially solidarity with the parts which are suffering most. I would like to itemize this kind of statement and say a few words in particular about positions of different churches. Not really, we don't have any powerful, strong statement from any church or ecclesial or interchurch organization internationally about the situation in Ukraine. We don't have any statement. I made a special research. I can assure that this is the case. We don't have any statement with moral judgment about what is going on. The only statements that we have tackle the legal or political aspects of the conflict. No one statement about the moral aspect, moral dimension of the conflict. It's striking, it is a surprise that if you listen to the discussions on the Security Council of the UN about Ukraine, most things that are said there by the representatives of the national states, by the nations, they are moral judgments. The international organizations, the governments speak, express their concerns about what is going on in Ukraine in moral terms, but not the churches. So it is a kind of swap of roles. The churches speak in political terms as political organizations and in legal terms, and give evaluation only to the legal aspects of the conflict, if they give any evaluation to the conflict. And the governments in our days, they speak they say what the churches would have to say. Well, yes, I will try to. Well, that is a good question, because probably the churches are considering themselves more, well, or inter-ecclesial, inter-church organizations as political players more than the churches. This, I think, has to do with the identity, with the crisis of identity of the churches and organizations, and well, it certainly, I think, testifies about the crisis in the identity and position, social and political position of the churches. Well, the strongest, I will try maybe to answer this question, we'll come to this question again after I mention some cases. One of the strongest statements made so far was a statement promulgated commonly by the Holy See and the Ecumenical Patriarchate. It was during the meeting of the Pope and the Patriarch Bartholomew in Istanbul in November 2014. In the rather extensive document or memorandum produced at the time, there were two sentences introduced to the statement. I know a bit behind the scene how it was hard to, to persuade, particularly the Vatican, to accept these two sentences. And they say, we also remember all the people who experienced the sufferings of war. In particular, we pray for peace in Ukraine, a country of ancient Christian tradition, while we call upon all parties involved to pursue the path of dialogue and of respect for international law in order to bring an end to the conflict and allow all Ukrainians to live in harmony. So, this is the legal statement. We pursue the path of dialogue and of respect of international law. which was a way to say that the annexation of Crimea was illegal, and, well, that's it. And this is the strongest statement so far. Well, it has been mentioned about not really comprehensible position of Vatican concerning the Ukrainian situation. This is so much contrasting with the, token signals of compassion that the Pope shows to every suffering person in the world, particularly poor and so forth. And it really strikes that sometimes it seems that the Pope adopts the language of the propaganda. He speaks, for instance, about fratricide in Ukraine, that this is essentially the civil conflict among the Ukrainians. No mentioning about the majority of the Russian forces fighting for the Ukrainian soul, which is a language of the Moscow propaganda, essentially. He also speaks about, he says about the involvement and overly excessive involvement of the Greek Catholic Church in the politics. It doesn't speak about the other church, the Russian church, being involved in the politics. So this really, well, strikes people indeed. And well, I think the explanation is very easy. He wants to unblock the Orthodox Catholic dialogue, which was blocked exactly for this purpose, to sell the solution to unblocking it. And it resembles to me the policies of non-partiality adopted by Pius XII during the World War II, and the policy of Benedict XV during the World War I, when they had the same kind of attitude. We don't take parts in the political conflict. We don't accept or reject, Hitler, Mussolini, because we just don't take parts. This was essentially the policy. Maybe you know it better. The designer of this policy was Pietro Gasparri, the Secretary of State under Benedict XV, and he was mentor actually of Pius XII. So his vision was very much behind this policy, but I think it harmed a lot the Catholic Church, this non-partiality. And I'm afraid I find many common points with the present position of the Vatican. I'm going to be critical about the WCC. Be prepared. Well, from the very beginning of the conflict, I did my Googling about the position and statements of the WCC concerning Ukraine. Well, every month or so, or 2 months, I just went to the website of the WCC, and in the search line, I just typed in Ukraine, and during the entire conflict, I received only 3 or 4 results. Well, one of the recent results was the message of solidarity with the Dutch churches of the Malaysia Airlines disaster, which was really a great tragedy, and it certainly deserved a statement of compassion from the WCC. And I think in Ukraine, we, as no other country, understand how large is this tragedy, because we have the same kind of losses in the same conflict. But not really as a line of solidarity from the WCC with the Ukrainian churches that lost their members to this aggression. No evaluation of the religious aspect of the conflict. The east of Ukraine is the case where religion is abused to justify violence, and no word of discerning between religion as such and abuses of religion. Yes, it was mentioned that less than a month ago, there was a big delegation from the WCC to Ukraine. This was a very important step. This was really something that I didn't expect, and I was very glad that it happened. The delegation was represented by really high top people from the international Christian community, including the General Secretary of the WCC. As such, this delegation was an important witness of the WCC, a witness of concern about what is going on in Ukraine. At the same time, from the reactions that I received from some colleagues of mine among the Ukrainian churches, it's a kind of their reactions are kind of ambivalent, to say. Some of them, they saw this delegation, or actually the way it performed in Ukraine, as a kind of bias, because they met only with one church as a church, the Church of the Moscow Patriarchate there, and with the rest of the churches, they had either formal meeting in the framework of the all Ukrainian Council of Churches, Religious Organizations, or it was a private meeting organized by the nuncio in Ukraine, where they invited some representatives of the churches they didn't want to meet publicly, officially. They try to garnish this in the communique in an unfortunate way by saying lies. At least I found two incorrect things or lies. First, that the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, with which the delegation supported and endorsed more than any other church, was a member of the WCC. No, it is not. It is not on the website of the WCC as a member, and moreover, when I was the president of the external church relations of the Moscow Patriarchate in Ukraine, we started testing water about becoming a member of the WCC, and we received an answer no. So at that time, it was no. This time they say yes, we are the member of the WCC, but we are not. And this was said just to justify why they met only one church and they didn't meet other churches. The second incorrectness is the way how the conflict is presented. It is presented as a conflict between two nationalisms, which is only partially true, which misses a very important point about the Maidan, because the Maidan was not a clash of the Ukrainian nationalism against the Russian nationalism. It was a clash of the civil society against the totalitarian regime. And the majority of those people who went to the Maidan, and the majority of people who fight on the Ukrainian side nowadays, they are Russian-speaking people. There is a statistics which has been published recently about those who fight on the Ukrainian side in the east of Ukraine. 62% of military and volunteer battalions, they speak Russian. So it's a complete misrepresentation of the picture that this is a conflict between the Ukrainian nationalists and Russian nationalists. This is wrong, and this is actually a point of the propaganda, and it has been reflected in the communique of the WCC. Well, even more pathetic is the reaction of the Orthodox churches. The only official reaction of the Orthodox Church that I know is the reaction of the Greek Orthodox Church. On its synod on August 25 of last year, 2015, they came together, the Synod of the Greek Church, and they came together and they decided to send a letter. This letter was to be sent to the Patriarch of Moscow, and the Synod of the Greek Church asked the Patriarch of Moscow to ask President Putin to lift embargo on the Greek producers of olives. That is the only statement of the Orthodox churches about the situation in Ukraine. So, here we are. And just compare these kind of reactions with the stand of the international Christian community against apartheid. Well, it means that the Ukrainian churches need to fight for themselves. They need to fight for themselves, for their society, and for Europe, without any support from the churches from Europe. It is quite contrasting to an interesting situation which is emerging in Ukraine, the situation of unexpected friendliness and collaboration between Muslims and Jews. It was mentioned today that many Jews and many Muslims came together to the Maidan. They fight together with one another against the aggression in the east of Ukraine. There are rabbis who fight. There are Muslim battalions who fight against. Well, they fight actually against Muslims from the other side, the Chechens of Kadyrov from the other side. And imagine Muslims fighting against Muslims hand in hand with Jews in the east of Ukraine. This is exactly the case. And it's not just about fighting together. It's about rapprochement, about solidarity. They really feel close to each other. They don't kill each other like they did like they did recently in Copenhagen or like they did in Paris. No, they feel solidarity. They understand the pain of the other side. Jews understand what the Tatars lost in Crimea, and they really compassionate with what is going on in Crimea. Muslims understand that yes, it is a high possibility of pogroms in the east of Ukraine if the separatists win. One of the first decrees of the so-called Donetsk Republic was a call for Jews to show up and to register that they are Jews and to bring $50 as a fee. Yeah. It was quite true. Well, it does mean that the Jews showed up. Actually, they ignored, obviously, but I think it was proven that it was not a fake. Yeah, but I mean, obviously, the xenophobia and anti-Semitism is growing in the east of Ukraine. If Ukraine loses that territory, that will be, for the first time after World War II, a territory in Europe with almost official anti-Semitism and with a really serious and real threat to Jews there. So Muslims understand this and they support Jews. I think they demonstrate, Jews and Muslims in Ukraine, they show the Christian churches the way of solidarity and rapprochement. Thank you.
Okay, this is a very interesting presentation, I think, as well. I'm a little bit, I don't know, confused. I'm not confused easily. But maybe we'll start a discussion directly first with Father Kirill's presentation. A few questions if you want to have some kind of informative questions, and then later we just enter into the discussion. I think in the last presentation there's enough material to keep us busy for a while. So, okay. So first question for Father Kirill, first presentation. Did I thank you? Did I thank you explicitly?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
And first is Ukraine also the third key to Jewish and Muslim solidarity.
Exactly. That's what I meant in the conclusion. Yes.
I have one question. You said several times that Ukraine is like South Africa of nowadays. And who do you see as a Nelson Mandela of Ukraine?
Well, it's difficult to say, indeed, because you will finger a person, others and other people would not like it. Well, I think there is a person who is properly compatible with these figures. I think it's Cardinal Huzar. he's quite close to that role. Yep.
Yes, thank you very much for your clear message to us. I have a question. How come that we always hear so clear a voice from the Pre-Catholic Church concerning the political situation, and not so clear and loud the position of the other churches? The reason why I ask this is that we have the impression that the churches in Ukraine are themselves very divided.
Yeah, that's very true.
And that is a problem then for other churches to react on this very tough situation.
Yeah.
In February, there was the dinner visit of the Roman Catholic and the Greek Catholic communities to Rome, and certainly also there has been spoken about the situation in Ukraine. And again, you do not have their political voice then of what you see regarding what is happening in the provinces. That's another question. But it would help a lot if the churches of Ukraine would give a clear message.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very true. The problem with the Ukrainian churches is that, except one, the Church of the Moscow Patriarchate, they speak in one voice, more or less. And the other church is deeply divided in itself. I think the division within the Ukrainian Church of the Moscow Patriarchate is a division not regional but horizontal. It's a division between layers. There is a leadership who has responsibility to speak on behalf of the church, right? Which keeps silence. I don't know. I will probably explain in private what is going on there and why it keeps silence. But I should say that on the layer of priests, the priests are really concerned about what is going on. Really concerned. They have more bold voices. They are more outspoken, and the only problem with them that they cannot speak on behalf of their church officially. And much more concern is on the layer of laity. And lay people, they don't speak. They cannot speak on behalf of the church. They just walk out. And the priests say that they've lost so far approximately half of their congregations and parishes, because of this unclear position of the church. So the church somehow speak. Well, this one church, I mean Moscow Patriarchate Church, and this church speaks by just leaving this church. And it doesn't speak officially, well, for the reasons I will explain privately. I don't want to make it publicly.
You spoke about three areas where reconciliation should start. And it struck me that you didn't mention the reconciliation or trying to reconcile people who are now considered to be perpetrators and victims.
Yeah.
I could imagine that that would be very difficult, but that there would be a dialogue or a kind of process of reconciliation between those who are heads of the rebellion in the east and the government in Kiev, because that they are real adversaries, the enemies of them. And they should be reconciled.
Yeah.
Perhaps that would be very, very difficult.
Yes, it will be extremely difficult, but I think the first step towards this second reconciliation will be through the third reconciliation, the reconciliation of narratives and the construction of propaganda. First, propaganda needs to go out, to be removed from the process of reconciliation, because as far as we have propaganda, we cannot really do anything about people's mind.
Truth,
Yes, it is about finding truth and bringing people to subscribe to the same truth. When they do this, then this opens us a way to reconciliation and to healing the wounds of the war. And of course, atrocities are committed from both sides, certainly. and people from both sides suffer. That's also true, truth, and we need to do with this reality.
Who should do that?
Sorry?
Who should or can do that?
Who?
Fighting against propaganda. I mean,
Good to say.
stop in the Balkan region.
I think we should do this.
Who is the?
Oh, just those who are sitting in this room.
When you write your article, take care that you don't take any propaganda.
I mean, yes, certainly. Well, there are good journalists who cover the events. I find how the events are represented in most quality Western newspapers quite accurate, and news agencies. I find them good. But the problem with their reports is that there is the propaganda by Russia Today or whatever. People watch that, compare, and think that the truth is in the middle, and that is exactly, as I said, this is the problem. So it's important to say truth, and it's important to wrap it in a way to be understandable to the people in the East. In the way to, well, it's a bad wording to say to wrap the truth. Truth doesn't need any wrapping, but it's important to deliver it to the people affected by propaganda, which has been extremely strong, which was really, it has been recognized. Europe hasn't seen something like that for decades.
Okay, so Helene, ladies first, and then you were in the same time. So Helene first, and then Alphonse. Yes. She left. Yeah. Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, like you, I have been greatly disappointed in the World Council of Churches and its silence. The first expression of concern where the Ukrainians cannot stand any longer.
No, they turned it into a joke.
It is a joke now. Yeah. We are deeply concerned.
Yeah.
But the first expression came only after the massacre.
Yeah.
So, like you, I have been visiting the website, and there was nothing. When I heard about the visit of the delegation, I was very skeptical. So this is too late, so it makes no sense. Mm-hmm. Nevertheless, I helped and assisted our moderator, Karin van der Broeke, to be prepared for the meeting. Because I thought at least some communication is better than no.
That's true.
And then I heard that there would be a longer meeting of 3 hours with the All Ukrainian Council of Churches and Religious Organizations, and that all the members would sit around the table, and that they could make their statements and tell the truth from their perspective. So that was my motive to at least to support
and it worked.
And
it happened.
To put some hope in it. So maybe this brings the World Council of Churches a step further, and maybe they're more brave in taking a position. I know that taking a position, if they really take a position for victims, it would mean a big conflict with the Moscow Church, and maybe the Moscow Church will respond by leaving the World Council of Churches. As for me, the time has come now that this should be the consequence, and not longer, keeping on silence, which is actually lying about what is going on, and being a hostage of. But maybe this is diplomatically completely wrong.
Well, I think yes, maybe.
So what could be the solution?
Well, the WCC, everyone with common sense and attentiveness understands that the WCC keeps silence over a conflict which is a major European conflict, while the WCC express concerns about every, minor doesn't mean not severe, conflict in the world, but keeps silence on the war in Europe, which takes lives, and with very heavy engagement of religion and the churches, including the member church of this organization in this war. And I think the WCC loses credits among its members. I cannot suggest solutions to the leadership of the WCC how to act, but I think the way that they've chosen to act is wrong, and it is damaging for this organization.
Okay. Alphonse, please.
And I think if you speak about that propaganda has to be constructed and to be well, to put it a little bit provocatively, I was trying to do. What I mean is, well, everyone who has a little bit of experience in browsing the internet for information about Ukraine leaves the screen after 2 hours completely with the feeling of chaos in his head. What actually, alongside which criteria would be distinguished, even reliable information. Okay, with experience, there grows also the kind of sense of what you find with things that are reliable or not. But have in mind is something different, and we addressed this morning in Amy's lecture about the next. I think if this is also about establishing different narratives, we should be aware of that our narratives in Western Europe often have been labeled as post-European, whereas the narratives in opposition to each other in Ukraine are very much heroic. Yeah. This is the problem in West Macedonia. So if heroes require support, they need a situation where we discuss it in more post-European way, and that creates a part of the ruptures in the discourse. But we do not actually know the way in which we should support something.
Yeah. Well, I think it's more simple than that. I think we don't need to be politicians, and we don't need to be diplomats. We need to be Christians in this regard, and there are very clear criteria of where the truth is. If there is lie, well, it should be rejected, regardless who lies, which side lies. If lie as inconsistence between the reality and the words, right? So we have testimonies, we have statements. They're different. If there is an attempt to steal the territory, to steal the property of people living there, to expel people this is another violation of another commandment. This is also very simple. So things should be judged against very common criteria, Christian criteria, commandments. Let us try to judge, to construct the kind of moral frame of this conflict. This is something that I try to do myself. Just let us try to itemize the moral articles stemming from the gospel, which describe the situation in Ukraine. I don't claim that truth belongs to only one side. No way. I think both sides, they have committed quite a number of wrong things, but it means that both sides should be judged, and our conclusion should be on the criteria which where is probably more truth, if you want. So those in this regard, I think sometimes we need to be more like Alabama Baptists. They see the world very simple. If this corresponds to the commandments, to the gospel, this is right. If it doesn't, this is wrong. This is an oversimplistic way. But this kind of moral agnosticism is another wrong thing. Sometimes let us start with very simple judgments of what is going on. Who kills? Who steals? Who lies? Okay? And then we come to a more complicated constructions of narrative. And then we construct a narrative that could help other people to get rid of the, of the results of the propaganda. Yeah, I know maybe it's not satisfactory, but let us speak about other ways as well.
When you speak of this way, that this heavenly 100 also in Ukraine is very helpful as well.
Well, it is.
Because I consider it as just a big ideology, which you, when you mean it harmful, you could also name as propaganda, religious propaganda, other sort, Russian propaganda or whatever. And in this sense, you say, well, the only thing that helps is telling the truth. I can support that, but then this heavenly 100 theology isn't very helpful itself.
Yeah.
That is something of the Ukrainian churches themselves.
Well, I also believe that it's not exactly helpful, this theology of heavenly 100. It's another way of confusing political and theological things. I would agree with this. I'm speaking not about precisely the heavenly 100. I'm speaking about the conflict in the east of Ukraine, which is more clear, which has more clear moral implications, I think. And there are some quite sophisticated techniques of creating propaganda, which should be aware of probably in trying to figure out what is the truth. The technique is very simple. I do something, I know it is wrong, and I say, you do this. Because the moment you start accusing me, I pay back you with the same accusation. I do something, I say, you are fascist. Okay? I know I am, but I say you. This protects me, or at least it confuses judgments. Okay? So that's how it works.
Journalists coming from all kinds of countries who have studied and speak the languages, they should analyze the propaganda and they can inform what's going on. Yeah. Are they up to the job? Those who are working in Russia?
Many of them, to my knowledge, many of them. Not necessarily. I met, some time ago, the correspondent of the New York Times who covered the Ukrainian events. He was a person resided in Moscow, and many agencies, actually, even good agencies in newspapers, they have correspondence only in Moscow. So sometimes they see the events from the Moscow perspective, which is not always helpful. But I find most reports more or less adequate. People are professionals. Well, they are good. Well, that's why I say quality newspapers and good agencies like BBC, or they are quite professional in covering the events.
Yes.
My personal criteria for identifying reliable information is, or one of them is, if someone reporting on the spot is able to say, I don't know.
Right.
As far as he is not, doesn't have any access to real evidence. And that it makes it puts it in a weak position compared to those who pretend to know the ultimate truth.
Yeah.
And the same is a bit with this post-heroic narratives. You don't have the easier. What do we really have to offer? It's a bit, well, okay, let's judge according to the Ten Commandments, but also let's face the fact that in comparison or in confrontation with those who offer simple truth, fundamental insights, simple stories of villains and heroes and victims and criminals, they have something less to offer. It would make the world more complicated. And they have complete narrative and less attractive, less tentative. And I think this is a crucial problem. We can't stop with judging the world, including the question we judge, according to the Ten Commandments, and then this does create a narrative which is able to match the. So there are some waypoints beyond politics or re-entering politics.
That's certainly so. That's certainly so. It is a difficult job, certainly, to make judgments. But there is another extreme just to avoid judgment, something that people do, or find excuses. It's difficult to judge. That's why we better not judge, because it's not really comfortable, and we lose, assets, and we lose many things, members, whatever. No, it's a difficult job, but who says that ethics is easy? But I think this is exactly the point where Christian ethics should be applied. If it should apply to any other point, it should be there. Yeah.
A question related to that, because if we go and look for the truth, are we then immediately judging? So I think we just discussed this story of we have the 100, and it's maybe not very helpful in terms of reconciliation. And I immediately thought of the story of the Berkut police officers who also died on Maidan.
Yeah.
And we had this big commemoration last month, and they were not present. And they also have their truth and their story, which we shouldn't then forget about if we're looking for the truth. It's multifaceted.
That's very true. And again, if I may just briefly respond. Well, to a great extent, I believe, maybe I'm wrong, but I believe to a great extent, this is a way of also how propaganda works. Propaganda works in the following way. There is a good deal of social unrest in the east of Ukraine. People were as dissatisfied with what was going on under Yanukovych and before as people in the center, right? They were as concerned about corruption, about injustice as people in the center. People in the center of Ukraine, in Kiev, they came to the Maidan and tried to articulate their dissatisfaction through religious terms, through moral values, but I think it was more or less about what they really felt. So their slogans on the Maidan really somehow expressed what they meant. In the East, the same dissatisfaction was used to alienate people from the center. This dissatisfaction, social unrest, was channeled to this antagonism between Russian and Ukrainian. The Maidan was wrongly and purposely misrepresented as a kind of Ukrainian nationalism, which was not exactly the case. And people in the East said, well, all your, dissatisfaction is because those people now want to come upon you. In order to achieve what you want, you need to resist them. And their energy of social unrest, their feeling of justice, because they were moved by the feeling of justice, facing injustice in their region, it was channeled exactly to the aggression against the Maidan. Okay? There was no the same aggression on the Maidan against the East. No. Well, people were welcome. If you come from the East, you are most welcome to join us. If you are Russian speaking, you are most welcome to join us. What we fight against is this injustice and this kind of feeling of dissatisfaction. That's why behind every propaganda is something true, sincere. Okay? And our Christian discernment should help us to discern these motives of people from the shape, the words in which those motives were wrapped by propaganda. This requires wisdom, certainly. And those people are not completely wrong. There is some good truth. Moreover, if we find this truth behind the unrest, we find a way of reconciliation, because those people in the East, they wanted justice. They didn't want corruption. And the people in the East, they just expressed it in different ways. If we somehow roll it back to their, to the core feelings of people, we find a reconciliation between them. We essentially say to them, you see, you fight against us now, but we on the Maidan died for the same purpose for which you are fighting now. Let us just understand this. That is, I think, could be a way of how depropagandization can work, and how we can, through saying things, through naming things by their names, we can actually find reconciliation between the fighting parties.
In the last word, when you said naming the things by names, more helpful than speaking about truth.
I don't see any difference, actually.
Value in itself. And my experience in contact with Ukrainian people, that to speak about reality, to name practice, to be able to give even words. Many people. So complicated. To listen to somebody from another opinion.
Yeah, that's true. But again, I don't see much difference between truth and naming things by its name.
Maybe because maybe I could say I'm not so from a religious background. And then I'm listening to people when let's say in a Christian area, it becomes like the truth. It sounds sometimes clear.
Like a bias,
And of course I know something of Christian tradition, but in such sensitive things, it becomes an easy word which has very different meanings, like dignity we had this morning.
But still, I think even if we speak about dignity, I think we should mean one thing when we speak about it. This is essentially important.
I agree totally. The word is very essential. But when I often say in groups when I'm talking, we have to take people serious. People in Lithuania ask me, what do you mean? And I'm not the stupid people, we're social.
Right.
And they are very concerned about it. So they are more advanced, in my opinion, than many others.
Maybe there are also different kind of truths, because, for example, Sinta, what she told about is the people of Prosperity, for example, if you take an example, these are people who fought in the police force and demonstrators. So I mentioned this in the annual report of Communicantes of last year. So these people just sit together and they say, so how did you feel to throw a Molotov cocktail at the police officer? And the police officer has to reply to the demonstrators, okay.
No.
They ask him,
So, but Molotov cocktail was a reply.
See?
No, it was not the police's reply to the Molotovs. It was Molotov's
replied
to the police.
I mean afterwards. So these Berkut were discussing with demonstrators after the fact. So they discussed what did you feel when you saw this Molotov cocktail coming, or demonstrator has to tell what did I want to achieve by doing this. So I mean, this is a different kind of truth than the truth of who done it, or who is the mastermind behind it. Is it Putin or the Jews or whatever? Because you have all kind of stories and all kind of so I mean that's a different kind of truth. And so you have this truth of perpetrator, victim, etc. And which is, I really find it a very nice example, because that is what reconciliation is about. You just tell what you felt. That's the truth.
But
on the other hand, when I go back to, I just want to say, because, well, I'm listening to you, I want to hijack your, but also with the World Council of Churches, I find it extremely strange, also with a little bit with the Roman Catholic Church, because you said Pius XII, but even look at the stance of Pope Francis, I would say it's even worse, because I
didn't want to say that.
Because Pope Pius XII had a kind of generic speaking of addressing general values, and they should be applied to Jews as well. So that is kind of generic speaking, but here it's very confused. But I think that in this sense, the Russian Orthodox Church is what I observed maybe already 10 years ago. They are always accusing the West of, well, the whole riddle of gay marriage, all those relativistic, and we feel all very guilty about it. In the West, we think, okay, we squandered our religious values, were we right or wrong, the churches are empty. And so they say, okay, now we have to tell these very pious people, apparently very pious people, that they are wrong. We want to we feel guilty about it, so we just let them do. That's what my opinion actually.
I think
it's guilt-driven.
I'll try to answer it briefly about which is also concerning the multiple truths. I had a chance a couple of months ago to talk to a Greek metropolitan who is an important figure in the hierarchy of the Greek Church. He's a member of the Synod, and he's kind of really in Athens. I don't want to name him. And I asked him just bluntly, what do you think about the conflict of Ukraine? And he answered me very simply, of course, this is the Pope. Certainly, this is the Pope who is to be blamed for everything that happens in Ukraine. And he was absolutely sure about this. And I say, well, look, you now speak the language, the Vatican. You speak the language of the propaganda, Russian propaganda. What do? You shoot your own leg. You just endorse the same kind of beliefs, and you don't really help neither the situation nor yourself. This is exactly, you see, I urged you to think simply about things, right, from the perspective of Christian ethics. And now we face another simplistic way of thinking, which represents the conflict as a conflict between, the Pope and the Orthodox, the rest of the Orthodox, in terms from the Greek perspective, for instance. Or it represents the conflict as a conflict between the Greek Catholics and the Protestants, or schismatic plus Greek Catholics against the Orthodox, which is another wrong presentation, because as I said, the stats say that the majority, over 50% of those who fight in the East, they are Russian speaking, and if they go to any church, they go to the Church of the Moscow Patriarchy. So we have a situation when the other side, the one side and the other side, both sides in the east of Ukraine, they kill each other, and most of them, they speak Russian language, and they go to the same church. What is different between them? That is the action of propaganda. I believe this is the propaganda of the Russian world that actually motivates people to kill, and the other side just tries to protect itself. And also, I think that this misrepresentation to say that this is a conflict between the Greek Catholics plus schismatics against the Orthodox, this is just an extrapolation of another propagandist pattern that presents the whole conflict as the conflict between the East and the West. Holy Rus against godless West, which is, for some, is an extrapolation of another, and I think this is the core of the conflict, the Soviet or Neo-Soviet against non-Soviet, anti-Neo-Soviet. I think this is the core of the conflict. All other things are just, dresses. Greek Catholics against Orthodox, Holy Rus against godless West, No, the core is this continues to be the conflict of the Cold War between the Soviet system of thinking, mentality, and citizenship, and the non-Soviet mentality and citizenship. Just this line of division moved from the western part of the Warsaw Bloc to now to Donbass, essentially. So it is the old conflict. And in this term, I believe that Huntington was profoundly wrong when he said that the new conflicts would be the conflicts of civilization. Something that they like now in propaganda. Huntington became the star of the propaganda, and he was wrong at the time. He thought that the new lines would be against along the religions, but essentially the line of the conflict is still the Cold War style conflict between the Soviet and non-Soviet.
Last question. What is your educational role for churches in the West, how the United States or Germany do in the situation of between in their countries, with the politicians, or in context with churches? And what do you expect from us?
Yes, the answer is very simple. The churches should do what they are as churches supposed to do, not as political organizations or organizations with different experiences, political, social, whatever, cultural. What they should do as churches.
But how come that we as churches are alone in our confrontation without solidarity with the churches of Europe? That's the other part.
Yeah, and this is the reality. No statements, not even statements, not even concerns, which have become jokes in Ukraine. Not even concerns from the churches. The politicians, at least in Europe, they express their concerns. The churches don't. And I think we need really a closer collaboration. We need, if you want, the old maritimes, patterns of collaboration, as it was under the communist regime in the Soviet era. The same kind of, ties, friendship, support, concerns.